Andrew Ritzinger.
Hi everybody, my name is Andrew. Looks like every hippie in Redmond showed up tonight, huh? Yeah. I want to tell you a story from my memoir. My memoir is called Bad Mooney. And it's about when I was involved in a religious cult when I was 17 years old. The religious cult was called the Moonies. And it was a feared cult of the time, famous for brainwashing. A lot of kids like myself were kidnapped from the cult by their parents, in my case the San Francisco Police Department as well, and went through a deprogramming. I did that happened to me as well. This is a story about when I took a break from the Moonies. It's called Sunshine on My Shoulders. I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and I was a night janitor for the city of Boulder. And I had only been laid once before in my life. And it was, I lost my virginity to a woman who self-identified as a lesbian. And I told her, I said, you know, I don't understand why we're making love because I thought you were into women. And she said, oh, silly, it's not men's bodies I don't like, it's their politics. So I went from her to this next woman. And I had an extra $100 and I was determined to get laid. And there was no place in Boulder to seek comfort from a professional. So I took a bus to Denver, and when I got to Denver, I got in a taxi cab. And just like I had seen in the movies, I said to the driver, take me to where the ladies are, to where the women are. And he said, hey man, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, yeah, you know, professionals, you know, ladies, you know. And he said, no man, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, okay, just drive me around. So it's noon in Denver, and he turns right into this residential neighborhood, and I'm looking out the window looking for the occasional, you know, streetwalker trolling for Johns in a residential neighborhood. There were none. And I said to him, I go, well, hey, do you know where we used to call them porno palaces? Do you know where a porno palace is? He said, oh man, you want to go to the dirty books? And I said, yes! And he took me to a place called Pandora's Box. And I walked into Pandora's Box, and in those days, kids, there were magazines. And I looked through the magazines, and I was searching for the giant breasts, and I came upon this tabloid. And in this tabloid, there were ads. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. There were ads for women who were offering dates. And I found one ad that I really liked called Pleasantly Plump Pretties. And there was a woman who was sprawled on a bed, and she was hanging backwards off the bed, and her cleavage was huge, and I was like, she's the one. So I bought the tabloid, and as I exited the porno palace, I noticed this magazine called Animal Lovers. And there was a very large hog mounting a woman, and I thought that was pretty disgusting. So I went out to a phone booth, another thing that is old school. This is 1979, by the way. I'm 18 years old. And I called this number, and this woman answered, yeah, what do you want? And I said, hello, madame. I am interested in the pleasure of a lady this evening, or this afternoon. And she said, you a cop? And I said, well, no, I'm not a police officer, I assure you, madame. And she said, okay, well, I got to check to make sure you're not a cop, so you got to give me your number, you got to be a directory assistant, so I got to be able to look you up in the phone book. And I was like, well, gee, not in the phone book. And she said, no deal then. And I said, well, my dad's in the phone book. And she said, okay, where does your dad live? And I said, Moline, Illinois. And so she looked it up. She called directory assistance. And she found my father's number, and she confirmed my identity. And I sat there, and I waited for her to call back. And finally, she called back, and she said, okay. She said, what kind of ladies do you like? And I said, one with big boobs. And she said, yeah, they all got big boobs. What do you like, blonde, chubby, skinny? What do you want? And I was like, just big boobs would be fine. Like, the woman in the ad, And so she said, all right, yeah, that's sunshine, yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what, here's her address. So she gave me the address. And so I exited Pandora's box, and I was looking for a cab, and this guy exited right behind me, and he said, hey, you need a ride? And I was like, yes, I do, thank you very much. And I got into his El Camino, and he was driving me to my address, and we were going through a neighborhood called Capitol Hill, and the main drag through Capitol Hill in Denver is Broadway. And so we were driving along Broadway, and the neighborhood's just got seedier and seedier and seedier. Liquor store after Porno Palace, after Flop House, and we finally pulled up to the address, and it was a liquor store. And I said, I don't know, it's a liquor store. And he said, well, there's apartments above it. And I said, oh, yeah, it must be it. And he said, wait a second, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to go visit my friend. And he put his hand on my knee, and he said, how about a suck? And I took this opportunity to point out to him that I was a heterosexual. I was very proud of my use of the word. I just learned it the other day. So I said, no thank you, sir. I'm a heterosexual. And with that, I got out of El Camino, and I knocked on the door. And a woman answered, and she had stringy blonde hair. She was wearing a muumuu. And she did have big boobs, but I was disappointed they weren't the size of her head. And she invited me up this long flight of stairs, and I followed her up. And as soon as we crested the landing, she pulled a curtain back, and she said, and this is my daughter and son. They were about 9 years old. Little Johnny and Sally. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. Well, she knew what to do. So she took me and she plopped me down in a leather love seat, and she got on her knees and she put her hands on my legs and pressed herself up against me, and she said, how much do you think a lady like me gets paid for something like this? And I said, oh, I don't know. And then she said, well, how much do you have? And I pulled out $5 $20 bills and showed them to her, and she fanned them out before me, and she said, $100. You're in luck. That's exactly what I charge. I felt grateful that I had the right change. So she said, okay, I don't take it up the butt, and nothing like that, nothing kinky, just straight. And I was like, okay. And she took me inside of her apartment, and there were boxes all over the place, and I could tell that she had just moved in. And she fixed herself a drink. She had Smuggler's brandy, and she made herself a generous drink in a 16-ounce Tupperware tumbler, and she started drinking the drink, and she was sizing me up, and she's like, how old are you? And I'm like, I'm 18. She goes, let me see your driver's license. So I showed it to her. And she said, And then she walked over to her washer and dryer, and she said, this is broken. I can't figure out how to hook it up. Could you help me? And I was like, sure. And I looked behind, and I could see that she didn't have an adapter to the plumbing. And I said, well, you need this adapter. And she said, oh, would you be a hun and go get it for me? I'll tell you what, I'll drive you down to the hardware store, and you can pick it out for me. And I was like, I'll do it. So I went to the hardware store in her car with Johnny and Sally, And we got to Handy Andy's hardware store, and I picked out the plumbing part. And as we were exiting, she saw shelves, and she said, "I need some shelves built." And so she bought some shelves. And then we drove back to her apartment, and we got upstairs, and I fixed her washer and dryer, and then she had me build her shelves. And by this time it had been 2 hours, and I thought that this is the way it went, and I didn't know any different. And so I made her shelves, and then she was drinking the whole time, and she was drinking more and drinking more, and she was getting a little drunk, and then she said, "Well, help me unpack." And so I helped her unpack and everything, and hung her pictures on the wall, her velvet Elvis on velvet, and the whole bit. And then she said, "You know what? I'm going to make you dinner." And so she said, "Go out and buy some spaghetti." So she sent me out to the 7-Eleven, and I came back with spaghetti, and she said, "You know what? I can't get my TV and my entertainment system to work. Can you look at that?" And I was like, "Oh, sure, I'll be glad to do that." And so I fixed her entertainment center and set it up, but it didn't have the adapter from 3 prongs to 2 prongs. And I said, "You need this adapter." She said, "Could you go get it for me?" And I was like, "Sure." And she said, "Take Johnny with you." So Johnny and I went and crossed the street, and I held his hand, and we looked both ways, and he was talking to me, and he asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I told him I wanted to be an actor, and he was impressed with that. And I asked him about school, and he told me about dinosaurs, and we went to the Safeway, and luckily they had the adapter, and then we went back to where I was going to sleep with her, back at her apartment. And she made me dinner, and it was white bread, Wonder Bread with garlic powder on it, and iceberg lettuce salad. And she poured herself a big glass of Lambrusco, and she got drunker and drunker and drunker. And then she dismissed Sally and Johnny and had them watch reruns on TV in the other room. And then she took me into actually the living room, and she laid a blanket down on the floor. And she was drinking and smoking, and she said to me, "You know, I haven't always done this. I used to be a practical nurse, and I moved here from Denver, from Chicago to Denver, and my husband used to beat me, and I moved here because my sister was here, and the women I worked with were real bitches, and I came in late from work one day, and they fired me, and now I have to do this." She said, "I'm a good girl. I don't want to be doing this." And she started to cry. So I comforted her, and I put my arms around her, and I said, "I know you're a good girl. I know you don't want to be doing this. I know you're better than this. I know you'll find a job as a practical nurse again, and you'll be able to support your family." And she cried, but she felt better, and then she said, "All right, well, you want to fuck me?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, I don't do it up the butt." And I said, "I understand." So I laid upon her, and in 3 minutes the act was over, and she sat up, and she looked at me, and she said, "You want to fuck me again?" I said, "Thank you. Thank you very much." So then it was time for me to go home. By now I had made Sunshine's acquaintance for over 8 hours. And we got in her car, and she drove me to the bus station, and as I got out, she wrote her phone number down, and she said, "You can call me direct next time." And I said, "Thank you." And then I never had sunshine on my shoulders again. Peace and no nukes. 15 minutes, 30 minutes.